Right. Why did that not change? What's happened to my... Hold on. Just see if this will work. No, hold on. I got a freeze frame from earlier. Hold on. We will make this right. I'm sure we will. This is what happens when you do shit live. No, it's just not doing anything. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Hi, Richard. Thanks for joining. Technical difficulties today. I'm just going to actually just say bugger it and just switch to the other camera. Put that up there. Do this. And yeah, switch that one off. Switch that one on. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. Right, we're gonna have to put up with that today. Okay, so welcome back to Hedge History. So a couple of weeks ago, we actually hung out with James Murrell, the cunning man of Hadley, and his little Essex box of trap storms. Psycat, hello, hello. Really cookie am I? Thank you very much. Um, Now, if you missed that one, definitely go watch it because today's witch is basically what happens when you take Muriel and you drive him 6 hours southwest and dunk him in the sea. So today we're talking about the Pellars of Cornwall, and I need you to just hold on to that word for a second, Pellar, because it sounds made up. It kind of sounds like a Dungeons and Dragons class. Like I'm playing a level 6 Pellar, I have advantage on curse removal, but no, it's a real historical title. And once you know where it comes from, the whole tradition kind of clicks into place. Now back. Oh, am I looking? Oh, because I had my hat on before. Yeah, my beanie. All right. So the noun Pella is a traditional Cornish term for wise person or wizard or white witch. It almost certainly comes from the Cornish word pelor, which is someone who repels, who drives away. It's not someone who casts, it's someone who sort of uncasts. And that's the whole job in one syllable, basically. While a lot of cunning folk elsewhere in Britain did a bit of everything, like love charms, lost cattle, the occasional curse for hire, the Cornish Pellars headline act, their whole brand was breaking spells that other people had put on you. You didn't go to the Pellar to hex your daughter's or your neighbor's cow. Your daughter's, don't know where that came from. You didn't go to the Pellar to hex your neighbor's cow. You went to the Pellar because you were pretty sure that your neighbor has already hexed yours. Yeah, painful neighbors, I must say. Um, Cornwall was uniquely primed for this. It's a peninsula. It's got its own language, its own saints, its own everything, basically. It never fully assimilated into like a tidy English religious mainstream, and it never fully let go of something older either. The historian Owen Davies has this wild estimate that in the early modern period there were more cunning folk practicing in England than there were actual ordained clergy, and so more witches functionally than vicars. And Cornwall was one of the thickest pockets of that. So picture the world the Pella is operating in. It's a three-tiered cosmology, roughly. Anyway, there's the everyday world you and I bump around in. There's a kind of underworld or other world pressing right up against it. And think like mines, think the sea, think the moors. And then there's a thin permeable membrane in between that certain people can rough or can reach through, right? So the Pellar's whole professional identity is I am one of the people who can reach through. So combine medicine, theatre, law, and a little bit of priesthood, roll it into one person in one village, and that's your Pellar. Okay, so now here's the actual twist in the plot. And I think it gets lost when people kind of flatten this into the wise old crone in the fog or in the forest. Most Cornish pellars were men. That's the majority pattern across the record, okay? But it was women pellars who became the legends, the names that actually survived, that got written down and passed around for generations. And once you meet today's Pellar, you'll see why. She wasn't a footnote next to the men in the record. She was the standard everyone else got measured against. So, quick aside before we get to meet her, because I think this matters. The word witch gets slapped onto Pellars retroactively a lot by outsiders, by journalists, but plenty of the Pellars themselves would have bristled at that label. In their own framing, a witch was the bad guy, the one doing the cursing. The Pellar was the opposite number, the fixer, the person who who you called because a witch had gotten to you, right? So when you read old accounts of calling someone the White Witch of wherever, that white is doing a lot of quiet work. It's the community's way of saying this one's on our side. Okay, so just a good idea to hold that in mind when you're reading like the old records and things like that, where you actually do need those definitions in place to understand what's actually going on. So the single most famous one, hands down, is Tamsin Blight, sometimes spelled Thomason or Thomasine, locally nicknamed Tammy Blee. And she lived from 1970, oh sorry, 90, got my numbers mixed up, 1793 to 1856 in Helston. And she was known as the White Witch of Helston. And Tammy's whole reputation was built on undoing harm. People believed she could find lost objects, tell fortunes, cure the sick, and her real speciality, lift curses that other less friendly practitioners had laid. And she was apparently good enough and trusted enough that the stories about her death are genuinely kind of moving. People had themselves carried to her on stretchers while she was dying, just to lie beside her, and reportedly walked back down the stairs cured. Whether or not you take that literally, think about what it says about her reputation in that community itself. That's not some spooky old woman at the edge of the town. That's the closest thing Helston had to a hospital, basically. Her personal life is a little messier, though. I think it's worth including because it complicates the fairy tale a little bit. In 1835, she married a widower named James Thomas or Jemmy Thomas, who also claimed to be a Pellar. But where Tammy's reputation was spotless, his was not. He reportedly performed spell repelling services for young men in exchange for sexual favors, which is a genuinely grim little footnote sitting right next to beloved local healer. It's a good reminder that cunning folk wasn't some uniformly noble profession. It was a real occupation. It was practiced by real, flawed, complicated people, some of whom absolutely abused the trust of others. Okay, so let's talk about the toolkit because this is kind of the fun part. So Apellas' kit was this incredible mashup of Christian and pre-Christian material, sitting side by side with zero apparent contradiction. You had silver coins, salt, rowan twigs, iron nails, written charms folded into very specific shapes. The folding mattered, not just the words themselves. And the charms often invoked biblical names, Tetragrammaton, Jehovah, Elohim, Adonai, right alongside symbols and words that have nothing to do with scripture at all. One recorded charm literally contains the word Nalga next to some winged figure and a stack of divine names. Nobody was worried about mixing traditions. If it worked, it went into the bag itself. Speaking of bags, Pellars made actual physical charms for clients out of herbs and powders and ointments and stones and yes, sometimes teeth, bones, or graveyard dirt. And these were worn around the neck in little pouches. Now, a Pellar's knife was typically single-edged, a hilt of bone or horn or wood, and ideally made by the Pellar's own hand, used for both the practical stuff and the ritual stuff. One tool doing double duty. It's actually worth noting that, when we're talking about these periods and these people, it wasn't they used the same tools in the kitchen as they did in ritual. So, you needed to make supper, you brought out the cauldron. You needed to brew a filter, you used the cauldron, same one. There was no difference. You needed a knife, you got the one out of the kitchen. There wasn't kind of like a consecrated tool for X, Y, and Z, which was separated from everyday life. Um, you know, I mean, some carried a small portable cauldron for house calls themselves because apparently even magical professionals need a traveling kit, especially in this regard. Then there's my favorite objects in the whole Cornish tradition, the hold stone. This was called the Main and Booker, and this was literally in one translation the Devil's Stone. We often hear of the term hagstone. This was a little bit different, or termed a little bit different. This was the Devil's Stone. And this was a naturally perforated pebble found on the beach, worn smooth by the sea. You'd find these washed up with a hole straight through the middle. There's no tools involved. It's just tied and timed. This is probably one of the only tools that is completely and utterly naturally made and hasn't had any human hands influencing it. And there's something so quietly perfect about a coastal tradition adopting an object the ocean kind of makes for you. You didn't carve your protection, the sea kind of handed it to you directly. So people strung these on cord and hung them around doorways, over stables, sometimes over a sickbed. The hole itself was sort of thought to let harmful influence pass straight through and out the other side instead of settling on the person itself. Simple bit of folk logic actually. If a curse is something that has to land on a person or an animal to work, give it a hole to fall through instead. Why not? It's almost architectural actually. You're not blocking the bad thing, you're giving it an exit. Okay? And the charms themselves weren't just written once and forgotten either. A peller would often have you carry a folded charm for a set number of days, then instruct you to burn it, bury it, or float it out on the water. The disposal was as ritualized as the writing. The magic wasn't just in the words on the paper, it was in the whole life cycle of the object, start to finish. So, what's the actual through line from Mural to the Pellars? Same species, different accent, honestly. Both operating in that liminal professional lane. Trusted, a little feared, absolutely essential to their community, existing in the gap the church and the doctor couldn't quite fully cover. And Mural had his bottled storms and his grimoire. The Pellars had their hold stones and their folded charms and their syncretic little pouches around the neck. There's different toolkit, same job description. You are the person the village calls when something's gone wrong that ordinary remedies can't touch. So if there's a big point buried in all of this is that cunning folk wasn't some monolithic tradition handed down from a single source. It was intensely local. Essex grew Murrell, Cornwall with its own language and its own coastline and its own three-tiered cosmology grew Tammy Blight and men like her difficult husband. But the same impulse, wildly different expression, shaped entirely by the land and the culture around it. All right. So next time, well, that's a bit quick today. I thought it was going to be 20 minutes, only 15. But next time we're leaving Britain, and for well, just for a little bit anyway, and we're going to head to County Clare Island for Biddy Early, blue bottle in hand, healing and divining her way through the 1800s, and eventually standing trial for it. If you thought Tammy Blee's story had some edges, wait until you meet Biddy. But that's 2 weeks from now. But that we're kind of going to talk about the devil in the craft next week. We're just spoken about the devil's stone, so I think it kind of fits in quite nicely. All right, that's actually it for this week then. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see everybody next time. Well, on Sunday, if anybody's around for that, just pop in and have a chat in the Covenstead. Okay. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. I just want to say though, if you have got questions or anything, just leave them in the comments to the video after it's yeah, after we've done the live thing here, and I will answer them somehow. All right.